the Viltrox 16 millimeter 1.8 prime. 16 millimeters is just an insane focal length because you can use it for basically anything. You can use it to get cool shots like this where I'm pulling you out of a mailbox. So one of the best things about that is it's super lightweight. It's made of metal, so it actually feels super sturdy. But look at that field of view you're gonna get. So if you wanna do landscapes, you wanna vlog, you wanna do cityscapes, anything like that, even architecture, which this would be phenomenal for architecture. It comes in great. And I know, before you start pointing out the vignetting in the corners, I've got a VND on. And this VND causes that, especially at super wide angles like 16 millimeters. Obviously, you might not always want to use this to vlog, but it's compact, it's lightweight, and honestly, the competitors in this price point, there aren't many. Now there's the Sony that just came out, and that thing runs for about $800. Well, this thing runs for $580. It's a 1.8. It's got an aperture from 1.8 to f/22. It's got a clickable and declickable aperture ring. One of the coolest features is the LED top screen. So you can see where your aperture is and you can see where your focus points is. And also allows you to focus pull from one subject to another by the click of a function button. But you can see, I'm gonna move around just a little bit, and that focus test, that focus looks good. It's staying right on me, right? We move up and down. Oh, that's a little dizzy, but you can see how well this is working. But let's do a couple more focus tests with this one. And I'm gonna do something really quick, right? I'm gonna pop this off. We're gonna get really overexposed. So what we're gonna do is hit that aperture ring and just drop it. And now, look at that. Look at those corners. You see anything? Nah, you don't see any vignetting on those corners. And you see how focused it is in the center and how sharp it is in the center. This lens is so sharp in the center, it's absolutely fantastic. But now let's do that focus test. So at 1.8, you're gonna have this vignetting up in this corner right here, just because I still have the VND on for the sole reason of having this at 1.8 so we can test the autofocus at 1.8 because of it being such a shallow depth of field. Sometimes it is harder to catch the subject. So when I get close, we'll see, it stays on me pretty well. And I get super, super close because the focus distance is a 0.27. So that is very absurdly close to the lens. It's gonna come in handy when you're trying to do architecture photography, landscape photography, or real estate. And for real estate, you wanna make them rooms look huge. Even if they're 12 by 12, you want them to look like they're a 20 by 20. So this lens is gonna be able to do that because of how wide it is. Now, like I said, there's this vignetting here. We're at a 1.8, and you can see it's grabbing my focus. If I jump down, pop back up, it's grabbing me pretty quick. Now that we see that it can grab me at a 1.8, and I jump out of frame, jump back in frame, no issues. And I take a step back, and we're gonna go all the way back here. It's pretty windy out, so I'm gonna run up to the screen quick, and it's still in focus. That is how good this is at 1.8. And we can change it. We'll take this off. So we took the filters off, and we're just gonna crank this all the way to, let's do an f11. You can see there's no vignetting in the corners. This whole thing's gonna be in focus, and it's still gonna grab me because I'm the subject that's moving around. We're good. We're going back and forth, duck, up, grabs me, duck, up, over to the side, back in, pretty quick. Now we're gonna compare a couple photographs, and just so you know, I will not be using ND filters. I only use ND filters when I do the video test, so that way I can keep my shutter speed where it needs to be. But when it comes to photos, no ND filters are used because I want the clarity to not be distorted at all, because sometimes clarity can get distorted when you're using ND filters. So let's jump into that and compare a couple photographs. So let's jump into a couple images in Lightroom really quick. So here is the Fuji camera I have. We're shot at a 1.8. And if we look, you can see a little tiny bit of chromatic aberration around these edges, but it's very hard to see. Right here where it's up against the black, you definitely see it a lot more, but it's very, very minimal, and it really is not that noticeable. But when we go out, the thing you'll notice is shooting at a 1.8, there is definitely a lot of vignetting around these four corners. So that's something to keep in mind. But Lightroom has it built in, so you can enable your profile corrections, and it gets rid of that vignetting. But if you also look, it gets rid of a little bit of that barrel distortion. Now, it's not much, but if you look up here in this right-hand corner, you can see how much it changes, just ever so slightly. It's there, but it's not too drastic in my opinion. And we'll go to another image really quick. This is at an f4, and you can see first the image is very, very sharp in the center. right? And it's sharp all the way out to these edges. You can see whatever that was coming up from the table. That right there is very much in focus and is sharp. Now, if we go to it on this image, you can definitely see where it's a lot softer versus being on that F4 versus here is in focus, but we can see the difference in sharpness, in my opinion, between this one and this one. It's definitely sharper the higher you go up, but it is still sharp at that F1.4. But when we jump to something like 5.6, that vignetting starts going away. And that chromatic aberration is there, but it's still not as noticeable. We can look right here. We don't even notice it really here anymore. And these edges are still looking very sharp. You still have the distortion, but just look at how much of that vignetting is gone when it goes from that 1.8 that we showed earlier to that 5.6. Now we're going to jump up even more. We'll jump up to this F11, and you can just see very sharp in the center. Not much chromatic aberration. This lens is very, very good. When we enable those profile corrections, just look at the difference. There's not much vignetting to be fixed. So vignetting on this thing, once you go up to higher f-stops, looks very good. Now we're at f22, and we're just going to zoom in, right? You really don't see any chromatic aberration. This image looks very sharp, and if we take off those profile corrections quick, that vignetting is not nearly as bad. Yes, there's still barrel distortion, but that vignetting is not nearly as bad as it was when we jumped all the way at that 1.8. We can see it there versus if we go here and disable it, there's a huge, huge difference. Now, I'll put a couple links below for you to look at because there's a couple people like Spencer at Photography Life who looked into this and actually did a lot more detailed review on the vignetting and the chromatic aberration within this lens. Here's that nice screen that comes with it. We're at a 1.8. And you can see that if we change it, the numbers change in the center as well. You just have to look for that little yellow dot below it to tell you where it is. Now, it's not that big of a deal because obviously you can see the marker right here as well. And if you're looking down, you're going to be looking at both. So it's not really that big of a deal. I just wish these numbers would have been in the center instead of all the way to the sides, right? So now we're at F22 and it's all the way on the left-hand side. So you're going to kind of have to look around for a minute if you're using this dial instead. So one of the cool things is we can put this in manual focus, and there's these function buttons over here, and this will actually allow you to focus rack. So if we want this in focus, this lens right here, and then switch to that lens back there, we can actually manual focus these to switch back and forth without actually having to touch the screen. All right, so what we're gonna do is test these function buttons. So we have it right here, from autofocus to manual focus. And then there's these function buttons right here. So what this is gonna allow you to do is actually focus rack the image. So if you wanna go from one subject in focus to the other subject in focus, you can do it by just clicking this function button right here. So how do we do that? Well, you can see this A right here, and we're at a 0.66, and we can see that Remus in the background is in focus. So what we're gonna do is hold that function 2 button in, and as soon as that A turns green, let go of it. And then what we're gonna do is switch. And you can see B is also at the same point, but we don't want it at the same point. We want it all the way down to a 0.27 to get this one in focus. So what we're gonna do now is hold that in, and now we're gonna have our 2 focus points. It turned green, so now all we have to do is hit this function button, and we can go from that 0.66 in the background to be in focus, all the way to this one being in focus, back and forth. Now, obviously, it's not super fast that you might want it, but this is just a cool added feature in case you ever want to pull focus from 2 different subjects really quick on a wide angle shot. So let's just run down these specs of this lens quick again. So we've got that LED screen right there. We've got that clickable and declickable aperture ring that always comes in handy. Plus, we've got those function buttons that are customizable right there. It's also 15 elements in 12 groups with 5 rounded blades, and it's got that water sealing gasket on the back end. It does come in E-mount as well as Z-mount. You can use it on a crop sensor camera. It's just gonna be a 24mm equivalent. If you're looking for a lower budget lens to get into the real estate market, to get into landscape, to get into cityscape or architecture photography, or this is also great for vlogging. And if you rather have a lens versus having to go out and buy like a GoPro or a Pocket 3, this is essentially going to give you that same focal length that they use on those cameras. But as always, I appreciate you hanging out and watching this video. If you've got any questions or concerns about this lens, drop them down below. I'll be more than happy to answer. Thanks for watching. God bless. I'll see you in the next one.